Wow! That was shit! The Lord of the Rings of Power is an Amazon Prime show that's based off the world of Tolkien, which he created, which is Middle Earth, and tells a story about the elves, the dwarves, the reign of men, and how the Forge of the Rings came to be, and how there's an evil coming to Middle Earth, and Galadriel is trying to save everybody. The elves and dwarves don't get along, except these two, elf and dwarf, who are friends with each other. And then there's this elf that's trying to save a bunch of humans. And it's a pretty unfocused show. Yeah, I don't know which is exactly the main plot here, or how a lot of these things connect to one another, apart from small moments here and there. Oh well, I'll just review it the best I can. So, as you could probably tell from this in the opening joke, I did not really like the Rings of Power. This is coming from someone who has read the two books, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, watched The Hobbits and the trilogy of great films right here by Peter Jackson. I could say that there are a lot of inaccuracies and continuity errors in which this show is trying to connect to with the books and movies. It thinks that by the end, if it spits out enough visual callbacks and dialogue to the original movies, that it's worth anything. Unfortunately, it is dead wrong. I found the story, as I said, unfocused, and that's mostly due to me not caring about each story all that much. The Harfoots, in which are trying to take care of this old man, I didn't really see it go anywhere apart from the finale. The dwarf and the elf friend are pretty entertaining and the best part of the show. But Galadriel, if this is probably her show, if I'm being honest, she probably gets the most focus. But to be honest, if she's like the main protagonist here, I found her quite boring. And that's mostly due to her being too much of a perfect character. Now, I really like characters who are strong, but Galadriel, at least this version of her, felt like a Captain Marvel type character, in which almost all of her decisions are the right from beginning to end, and she barely has any struggle internally or externally to help her guide through the story or go through a character journey herself. She basically commands every character what to do. She ends up being right most of the time, and when she is not, it's just brushed aside quickly like it meant nothing. Her character arc, I just found quite boring for her, and despite her having a lot of action sequences, because I don't care about her character, I don't care about what happens. And since I know that she's going to be okay, not because I've seen the movies or read the books, but because this show itself established that this is a character who's so strong and unbeatable, I didn't care for her in the action scenes because I know that there's no sense of urgency with her, that she's going to be fine or okay. She is too strong of a character, too perfect of a character. And it felt like if they were going to change her character up from the books and movies, then I think that they could have at least given her a bit of an arc. Something that could hopefully gracefully connect to The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy or the books. What I also found quite disappointing was the visual aesthetic itself, surprisingly. I know this is supposed to be like a really expensive show. Like, I believe for 2 seasons of this is like $1 billion over. And like this season alone, if I remember correctly, it costed like $700 million. At first, I thought that these visuals looked great, but the more I stayed in Middle Earth, at least this version, I just found myself not getting immersed into this version of Middle Earth. And I think that's due to the way this was shot and composed and lit. It is so bright everywhere. There's so much special effects. And even when there are practical effects, it somehow felt not real in there. Apart from the orcs, nothing about this show felt real to me. Everything felt staged, perfectly composed and lit, and characters act the way they should act in certain scenarios. And nothing really felt that unpredictable. I never felt any urgency in anything, not even in dialogue sequences, which I found very boring, because none of the characters I was able to connect to on a deep level. And I'm trying to be objective as possible, because a lot of the criticism that I heard about this show happened to end up being true. If I were to give this positives, I will say that the Howard Shore soundtrack, I believe he composed the soundtrack, was really, really beautiful and could stand with his soundtracks for The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And as much as I harped on the visual style and look, the directing through most of these shows, and most specifically the first two, did catch my eye. And I really liked how most of the scenes were directed and how they were shot. But the way they were composed and lit and how everything looks visually just felt too fake for me. It's one of those shows that a lot of money is put into this, but it just ended up making the show look a whole lot faker than it does. And that is a really sad thing. And that's also a problem I have with the Hobbit trilogy. The only Lord of the Rings thing that I was able to feel like I was really there was the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. The characters are also more likable there. The threats felt more urgent there. Here, not even the villains felt threatening, not by design or motivation. They were all so forgettable. And attempts to try and connect us to the books, and in terms of timelines, and in terms of character reveals, I just don't really care. And also, a lot of it doesn't make sense. And I'm more serious about this because the Lord of the Rings media and everything, the books and the movies, that is some detailed lore. That is some well written shit. I mean, everything felt connected. Everything felt like it had a purpose. Like, even the most simple things meant something larger than life. Here, it just felt so standard and so Hollywoodized. I didn't care for the characters. I didn't care for this world or the people or the story. I found the visuals very lackluster at best. Overall, this is just a really disappointing show for me. And to be honest, even when I first heard about the show, I didn't have much hope. I hoped it would surprise me, but it just ended up being just as disappointing as I predicted. Not the worst thing I've ever seen, but in terms of Lord of the Rings media, this is probably the one I will least come back to the most. And for that, I'm going to give the Lord of the Rings of Power, a D+. The directing in the first 2 episodes specifically alone, some visual effects do look good. And there's a lot of effort put into it, and especially the actors are trying to give their all. But overall, I didn't like this show at all, and I don't see myself ever rewatching these episodes again. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you guys next time.